Fellowship with God, the need of the world. The crying need among people of all ages has been that individuals must understand themselves, their relationship to their neighbor and to their Maker, and know that they are inseparable. These are one. It is impossible to separate God from His creations, for He manifests through them. It is impossible to love God and hate our neighbors, whose souls are made in the image and likeness of God. Love and hate cannot live in the same heart. Too many of us count fellowship unimportant. Many of us are selfish and are neglecting to let those attributes that reflect fellowship have a place in our lives. If we are making this mistake, we know it, our neighbor knows it, and more than all, the Father knows it. The world is poorer because of the stumbling blocks we have put in the way of others. In this we are not only blocking our own development, but also the very purposes for which we were created. This fellowship with God, of which the world is so much in need, does not simply embrace kindness and gentleness toward friends, but also includes love for enemies. This relationship to God will likewise make us see that to love our enemies does not mean simply to have the right attitude toward them, but rather to have in our hearts a yearning for them to know the way. In their most terrible acts we can see a power for good misdirected. This attitude will help the world to better understand the obstacles and trials of others, including other nations, since peace on earth and goodwill toward all must first be experienced by the individual before it may be realized among nations. With this knowledge of the need of fellowship, how can we hold a spirit of revenge, dislike, or judgment? Would we dare to bind others by our thoughts? Love and brotherhood, reflections of fellowship with the Father, instilled into the hearts and lives of all, would bring this world into such a happy state that the millennium would be here in deed and in truth. It will be well for us to examine ourselves in order to know whether we as individuals are doing our full part. Are we fulfilling the law of love toward rich and poor, high and few, saint and sinner, friend and foe? There is no better place to practice love for others than in the home. Just watch its effects upon members of the family. If at home we cannot answer kindly, it will be better not to answer at all. It is far better for an angry thought to die unexpressed than for it to kill the good in the life of the speaker and retard the development of the one to whom it is addressed. And these become then thy mission. Open the door for those that cry aloud for a knowledge that God is within the reach of those that will put their hand to doing. Just being kind. Not a great deed as men count greatness, but just being gentle and patient and loving, even with those that would despitefully use thee. For the beauties of the Lord are with those that seek to know and witness for him among men. Before that we find the entity was in the Persian land when there were those experiences of the gatherings of peoples from various lands to the city in the hills and the plains. The entity came as one of those from the Persian land, being then the companion of the warrior for the king at that time. The entity then caught a glimpse of the message of love from the teacher in the city in the hills and, applying self and the ministry to those who were ill in body and in mind, carried to her own peoples those messages, those tenets, those kindnesses, that gentleness. For as ye will find, as every other entity or soul will find, it is the little things, the gentleness, the patience, the smile, that brings goodness, the spirit of truth, to the hearts and minds of people, not the loud railings or determination. Only gentleness, who is on the Lord's side. And who is thy Lord? These the entity learned, in the name then Asmaha. Who gains by being forgiven and by forgiving? The one that forgives is Lord even of him that he forgives. Be ye, then, in that way of, in principle and purpose, divine. He that holds grudges or pays for those activities that have brought contention in the life, makes the way rough and hard for self, and certainly brings sorrow to him that is life. And without favor with God or man. Know what you believe, what you wish to do, and know that it is not at variance to creative influences. or God? For, if ye hate thy brother, what will it profit thee to gain the whole world? And the brother doesn't mean the son of thy mother. It may be the one that's the farthest from thee, and the greatest persecutor of thine own people. Hate brings that which is irritating, especially to those that are creative in other directions. This body has a good mind, he has a good aptitude for activities with the fellow man. Don't abuse it. Use it as constructive influences. That should be the first mental attitude of the body. Be creative. Think well not only of what you are going to do or what others can do for you, but more as to what you may do for others. But consider self, it is not always well to hear criticism of self, no more than those who are involved in these activities desire that there be questions as to their purposes. Yet just as with self, when criticism is made of such a nature that it is constructive in its very nature and a healthy influence, it makes for an attitude not of antagonism, but rather of brotherly love. And notice the place it occupies, brotherly love is even higher than godliness and is next to love. The inclination then is to take out on others those little grudges or hates, and such should be eliminated from the entity's self. The entity should refrain from making or drawing comparisons as to others and thus belittling self. Such inclinations should be held rather, not in such a manner as to become stumbling stones, but he that would be the greatest among his associates will be the servant of all, a helpful force in his experience in every manner. Be rather done by all than ever taking advantage of any individual. For he that overcometh shall wear the crown, and not he that climbeth up some other way. For he becomes the thief, the robber to self of those glories, the knowledge, the peace that comes from making thy will one with creative forces. Which is love. Love, as thou hast seen, as thou hast dreamed, yet so little have ye practiced same. For there may have been errors, there may have been miscomprehension of the first causes. Yet each that would minister to the needs of a soul in its experience in any environ must, if for self or for the best environ for an entity's experience in the present, hold no animosity, no grudge. But know that what has been is the soul's meeting of its own self in the present. Concerning the advice given that those I hate the most I owe the most to, please explain how this applies to Mr. Husband's cousin and drinking companion, so that I may better understand it. These activities are expressed better possibly in that given by the psalmist. That which I hated has come upon me. That which one hates because of personal things applies to individualities or personalities. As one learns to eliminate such from the experience, by setting the ideals and letting the hates be as if they were not, one becomes free from hates. Thus making better harmony in the life. Each soul in entering an earth's experience does so through the graciousness, the mercy of the living Father, that the soul may become such that it may be in that association, that relation to the creative forces or the Father which was, is, the will of the Father in bringing such into consciousness in the first or beginning. In entering then, each soul enters with the influences both latent and manifested that have been a part of the experience of the entity. This to be sure includes then relationships with others. Then what is the purpose of each soul entering a material manifestation? That it may be a witness bearer for and unto the glory of the Father, which has been manifested through the Son, even Jesus, in making then those activities through and in which such may be the purpose, the desire of the individual entity. What are S peculiarities and what are mine, so that we may adjust our lives harmoniously? These, as indicated, are to be studied in each other. And the peculiarities, the oddities, the errors are to be minimized, not dwelt upon and increased. Minimize rather than crystallize or magnify any faults in the other. Know that thy associations are to be on a 50-50 basis, not 40-60 nor 20-80. But 50-50. And that ye must adjust thistles to each other's idiosyncrasies or peculiarities. For out of same ye should create that which is thine own in unison, that may make thee a peculiar people, a channel through which the glory of God may be manifested. Each entity, each soul, enters the material experience for purposes. These are not individual or of a selfish nature, though they are very personal in their application and their practice. Each soul meets constantly itself. Not alone in what is called at times karma or karmic influences. For remember, life is God. That which is constructive grows, that which is destructive deteriorates. Then, karmic forces. If the life application in the experience of an individual is made towards constructiveness, it grows and grows. For the individual entity grows to a haven of peace and harmony and understanding, or ye grow to heaven, rather than going to heaven. Ye grow in grace, in knowledge, in understanding. Then, what is the purpose of this entity's experience in this particular phase and time and period? To many, the entity is far in advance of its time, its period. It having caught a vision as from the mount, and the vibration or the sun of light is risen for the entity. Only to be shaded by selfish indulgences in the minds of those that have directed. Not the entity. Remember then is this. There are promises made by the creative forces or God to the children of men, that if ye will be my daughter, my son, my child, I will indeed be thy God. This is an individual promise. Hence the purposes are for an entrance that the soul may be prepared for an indwelling with the soul, the mind of a living God.